Hello and welcome to the final film in our RAN network series on the impact of COVID on PCVE. We're coming to you from our editing suite for this edition. This is where we make all our shows. And I'm talking to you from here because I can play you some clips that we've edited on this, and then we can talk to some of our RAN experts live on this screen here, all in one place. So, in our previous films, we've talked about some of the challenges that RAN practitioners continue to face as a result of this terrible crisis. In this film, we're going to meet three experts who've adapted and responded to the challenges thrown at them by the COVID pandemic, and who see the need for changing practices in a changing environment. We're going to talk to a practitioner whose focus is on digital youth work, another who's addressing the increasing proliferation of conspiracy narratives, and a third practitioner who's concerned with the perceived link between mental health and violent extremism. We asked all of our experts to film themselves over a few days to give us an idea of the problems they're facing and how they're responding to them. First up is RANQ420, a former youth worker from the Netherlands who's recently made some changes to his professional life.
Hello, I'm RANQ420 from the Netherlands. I'm a specialist in online youth work and the influence of social media on youngsters, teenagers, etc. During my time as a youth worker, I went to many schools and gave lessons about all kinds of things regarding to social media, the meaning of real friends, cyberbullying, sexting, grooming, digital footprint, polarization, etc. Organizations got to be aware of that, and they got to facilitate their people. I also mean knowledge. Teach them how to do the online work. Invest in online youth work.
And Frank's here now to tell us a little bit more about his work in the digital space. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you a lot for having me.
And why is digital interaction so important, and particularly as a result of COVID?
If you want to reach the youngsters, be in the neighborhood where the youngsters are. And the neighborhood with the most youngsters is the telephone neighborhood, right? It's the social media neighborhood. So if you want to reach them, you got to be there, right? And we can see with artificial intelligence and so, we can see in every real neighborhood what's going on, because we have the facts of the online neighborhood.
What does working online with young people give us in terms of opportunity?
There's a real big polarization going on. And that's why we have to train and teach the children how the social networks work. They see alternative facts, and then they see more of them and more and more and more. And in the end, they think that's the truth, right? And that's where a lot of teenagers say, I don't have to keep myself on the restrictions because it's all fake news, and everybody who says something different is fake. And what we got to teach them is how algorithms work, and that they always have to find different opinions, right? These algorithms are, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems for our future.
But how then can we properly engage young people online? How do we fill that void of these activities that are no longer taking place offline?
Social workers and youth workers, they got to understand that their online work is not instead of, but it's an extra. It's an extra way to get contact, to get the first contact. And if you got that interaction, then they keep seeing you, and then they feel confident. So it's not instead of offline work, but it's besides offline work. It's an extra way to contact them, and organizations got to take it serious. right?
How important is it to recruit digitally literate youth workers for this?
Oh, it's very important. Yes, it's very important. It's got to be in the education of youth workers. It's got to be a big thing in their education to become a social worker or a youth worker. We advise sometimes 20 to 25% of the time must be used on online work.
How important is it to roll this out? For example, in the Netherlands, what's happening on a national level?
Interesting. What we're doing now is talk to all kinds of organizations and level up until we reach the government. What we want is that every city, every organization who's doing social work and youth work, that they all do the training online youth work. I think the biggest change we need right now is that politics, schools, universities, they all have to take it serious. They got to take the online work serious.
Frank, thank you so much.
Goodbye.
The impact of COVID on mental health has, of course, been massive. Our next expert is a psychiatrist who works in France with violent extremists. Before we meet him, take a look at this.
My name is Guillaume Monod. I'm a psychiatrist for adults and for children. I work in a prison which is about 15 miles east of Paris. Working in a prison is very interesting from a medical point of view. 90% of radicalized detainees do not have a serious mental health issue. They have a problem in their life, in their married life, they may have problems in their job. They may be also seeking for a meaning to their life. The first time that they see a psychiatrist is when they arrive in a prison. This weirdness of living in a pandemic, which is a big problem. People who have mental health issues, they make up their own explanations, which are most of the time not very rational. Polarization is not the answer, it's the problem. It makes things much worse. So today we're really walking on a very thin ice.
And Guillaume joins us live now. Guillaume, thank you for joining us.
Yes, well, thank you very much for inviting me. Nice to meet you.
What impact do you think this is going to have on the general population?
Well, as a result of the crisis, the main mental health issue we're going to face is depression. There are going to be lots of depressions. Everybody is vulnerable, and everybody is going to react in the same way. Everybody is going to fall back to his family, to his friends, to his community. But that is a normal and general reaction in a time of crisis. I mean, that's something we should not fight.
Do you think the COVID crisis is reinforcing certain prejudices?
There are two ideas, really, which are deeply rooted in our Western psyche, in our Western collective stereotypes, representations of people. The first idea is that somebody who commits a crime is an enemy, but almost from a military point of view, he's an enemy, he's from the outside. The second idea is that crime is a disease. It's something you catch from somebody. You know, this idea of the groomers who just groom people in order to commit a crime, the idea is not just that they convince them, but that somehow they give them a virus, they give them a disease, they make them sick. So it's an enemy, he's a sick person, he comes from the outside, not from our community, which is healthy from a physical point of view, mental point of view. It's the others who go to, the sons of the others who go to jail because the others didn't raise them well. For many people, extremism is a kind of a disease which is contagious. And what do we see? A disease, COVID, which is a virus which is very contagious. So in the mind of people, there is this kind of mix of the COVID and of polarization of radical extremism or violence. This mix is really makes things much more volatile, much more dangerous.
What's the connection in your mind or in your practice with narratives and violent extremism?
This narrative is really the root of the problem. It's the root of polarization, it's the root of violence, because this narrative is very appealing because it's very simple, but it's also very dangerous also because it is very simple.
You've talked about the mental health pressures as a result of the fallout over COVID, but how do you feel about the post-COVID world?
We should really try to understand how people react when they are in their community, but we should not try to change the communities because it's totally impossible. I think it's more important to focus on a number of people who can give the proper message with the idea that the message will spread through a chain reaction.
Guillaume, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Goodbye.
One of the problems that's been highlighted again and again in our films has been the spread and use of conspiracy narratives by violent extremists. In a moment, we're going to talk to a practitioner who's very much focused on this work. But first, let's find out a bit more about him and how this work has been impacted by COVID.
I am Björn Wansink. I'm an associate professor from the University of Utrecht. I'm researching societal polarization in education.
This is one of the rooms where I lecture.
My research is about how do teachers teach about controversial topics in classrooms. Topics such as terrorism, colonialism, fake news, and since COVID-19 also conspiracy theories. And currently in Utrecht we see lots of these kind of stickers. It's all about conspiracy theories. One of the big challenges in debunking conspiracy theories is not to reinforce them. So by addressing them, you even get other students to get more interested in the theory. And you carefully have to think how to address that issue.
We're joined now by Bjorn for a live interview. Bjorn, hi.
Hi.
How vital a role do teachers play in the fight against countering violent extremism?
Teachers are extremely important because they can build a relationship over time with students. That is something that a government, for example, cannot do. But they also cannot solve the problems of society. So they can deal with it, they can help, but in the end, they are not the only ones that have to take action in relation to extremism.
So how do you manage to deal with the sheer magnitude of what's out there?
So what I do not focus on the digital problem right now because I focus on teaching and youth work. And they do experience that it is a problem, but most children, at least what teachers say to me, are interested in conspiracy theories, but not severe, deep conspiracy thinkers. So there's an opportunity they are still open to discuss their ideas. And when you become a real conspiracy thinker, you're not open anymore. You have to go into the dialogue still when the minds are open for dialogue, before there is a disclosure, a cognitive disclosure.
And why is it important to address this at the moment, like right now, during the COVID crisis?
The facts. People have to trust the facts or the fact bringer, and this is the big problem right now. People do not trust the fact bringers anymore or the scientists.
How do you go about keeping students' minds open in order to have these difficult conversations in the classroom?
You talk about football, you talk about the parents, you show interest in their personal lives. And in the end, when you have a difficult conversation, you will benefit from the trust you have built by building up these conversations. And then they might trust you as well and speak to you personally about their ideas and even more their extreme ideas.
So how do you strike that balance? Because it sounds like it's based on each specific context.
I think for us it's important for teachers to focus on the middle group and not on the extremes. Because when you go into teaching only about extremism, then you might reinforce that there are only extreme positions possible. But you should also focus on the middle ground, because still lots of all the people, but also students, they want to go for this middle ground.
Obviously, there are other institutions that sometimes need to come into play. So how do you fit into a larger network?
I'm involved in a couple of experiments, I would say, with also youth workers working in the school, and the youth workers go with, and when the students are out, they will also go with the students on the street, but they are also online. So I think when teachers and youth workers are not online anymore, or this world is totally behind what we can see, we miss a lot of things that are going on in the world of youth.
How important do you think it is then to have a cohesive, unified approach to this kind of work across Europe?
So I think it's good. It's really good to share our knowledge and what we do, but one unified approach will be very difficult because we have to adapt it to each situational context and each nation.
Bjorn, thank you for being here today.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching the last of this RAN series on the COVID crisis. I hope that we've at least raised some interesting topics and talking points for you to consider. Feel free to comment below and certainly check our website for more information and resources on all the topics that we've discussed. Until next time, goodbye.